What if your life changed in the time it takes to sing a single song? For one young woman, a desolate night shift at a forgotten roadside diner becomes the most important moment of her life. This isn't a fairy tale. This is a story about the brutal, soul-crushing and ultimately triumphant reality of a dream come true. It's a story of how a voice heard by chance in the dead of night, by one of the world's most powerful men, can echo from a greasy spoon kitchen all the way to the Hollywood Hills. But what happens when the dream becomes a nightmare? Stay with us as we unravel the story of Esther Carter and how a billionaire's whim became her ultimate test. The clock on the wall of Mel's 24-hour diner was Esther Carter's mortal enemy. Its synthetic hum was the soundtrack to her life, each tick a mocking reminder of another second spent in the greasy air under the unforgiving flicker of fluorescent lights. At 2:15 a.m. on a Tuesday in Omaha, Nebraska, the diner was a ghost ship in a sea of asphalt. The only souls aboard were Esther, a cook named Sal, who was half asleep over a crossword puzzle, and the occasional trucker who'd grunt an order for black coffee and disappear back into the night. Esther, at 23, felt an eternity older. Her vibrant auburn hair was pulled back in a tight, functional bun, and her uniform, a faded blue dress with a white apron, smelled faintly of stale coffee and fried onions. She moved with an efficiency born of exhaustion, her slender frame gliding between the red vinyl booths, wiping down counters that would be sticky again in an hour. This was her life, a loop of wiping, pouring, and fetching. She had once been a girl with a notebook full of lyrics and a voice that her grandmother said could make the angels weep. She had saved every penny for a demo gone to local open mic nights and dreamed of Nashville, of Los Angeles, of anywhere but here. Then her mother's diagnosis came. Multiple sclerosis, a creeping thief that stole mobility, then independence, then hope. The dream was packed away, filed under childish things, and the crushing weight of medical bills and caregiving became her new reality. The diner wasn't a choice, it was a necessity. Tonight was particularly bleak. A relentless drizzle slicked the windows, blurring the lights of the passing trucks on Interstate 80 into hazy comets. The diner was empty, a silent, sterile purgatory. Sal had finally shuffled out for a smoke break, leaving Esther utterly alone. In the quiet, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It was in these moments when the world seemed to hold its breath that the music would bubble up inside her. It was a pressure, a ghost of the girl she used to be demanding to be heard. She started humming a low, melancholic tune that had been weaving itself in her mind for days. It was a melody born of weariness and a stubborn, flickering ember of hope. Wiping down the last booth, she let the words come, her voice barely a whisper at first. Streetlights paint the rain gold on the glass. Another ghost of a day has passed. Her voice, freed from the confines of her chest, began to unfurl. It was a voice that didn't belong in a greasy spoon diner. It was raw, yet pure, with a smoky undertone that carried the weight of her worries. It held the clarity of a church bell and the grit of a bar-room confession. Unaware, she closed her eyes, her hand stilling on the vinyl seat. The song was about being stuck, about watching the world move on from behind a window pane. It was her soul set to music. And I'm a statue in this lonely place, with a stranger's smile stuck on my face. But in my head, I'm a million miles away. She let the final note hang in the air, a shimmering thread of sound that seemed to absorb the hum of the refrigerator and the buzz of the lights. Ooh, the silence that followed was different. It felt observed. Her eyes snapped open. In the far corner booth, the one she'd sworn was empty, sat a man. He hadn't been there when she'd made her last round. He must have slipped in while she was lost in her song. He was older, perhaps in his late 70s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through her. He wore a simple, dark sweater. Nothing flashy, but it was made of a material that looked impossibly soft. His hair was silver, and his face was lined with the maps of 1,000 decisions, 1,000 battles won and lost. There was an aura of immense, quiet power about him, a stillness that was more commanding than any shout. He was just watching her, a half-empty coffee cup in his hands. Esther's blood ran cold. How much had he heard? Her cheeks flushed with a hot, deep embarrassment. Singing was her private ritual, the one piece of her old self she kept hidden. I'm so sorry, sir, she stammered, rushing over. I didn't see you there. Can I get you a refill? The man didn't answer immediately. He just continued to study her, his gaze intense. That song, he said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. What was it? Oh, it's nothing. Just a silly thing I made up. She reached for his cup, her hand trembling slightly. He put his hand over hers, not to take the cup, but to stop her. His touch was firm, dry, and surprisingly warm. Don't ever call that nothing, he said, his eyes locking onto hers. That was the most honest thing I've heard in 20 years. Esther felt a lump form in her throat. She didn't know how to respond. Compliments were not part of the diner's currency. Who are you? He asked, his question simple but profound. Esther Carter, sir. Esther Carter, he repeated, tasting the name. My name is Larry. Tell me, Esther Carter, what are you doing in a place like this? The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. It wasn't, why are you a waitress, but why isn't a talent like yours out in the world? She swallowed hard, the practiced answer ready on her lips. Paying the bills, sir. Same as everyone. No, he countered, shaking his head slowly. Not like everyone. Not with a voice like that. He finally let go of her hand and leaned back in the booth. My plane had a mechanical issue, forced to land at Epley. My usual security detail wanted to put me in some 5-star hotel surrounded by yes-men. I couldn't bear the thought. I told the driver to find me a place with real coffee and no pretense. I came here to be invisible. He gave a short, dry laugh. And instead I found a voice. Esther was reeling. Plain security detail. Who was this man? He looked like a retired professor, but he spoke like a king. I don't understand, she said, her voice small. You have a gift, Esther, he said, leaning forward again, the intensity back in his eyes. A rare one. It's raw. It's untrained, but it's pure lightning in a bottle. What you just did. People spend their whole lives in sterile recording studios with armies of writers and producers trying to fake that kind of emotion. You just bled it out while wiping down a table. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a sleek minimalist wallet, and extracted a business card. He slid it across the table. Esther picked it up. The cardstock was thick, heavier than any she had ever held. The text was stark and simple. Larry Ellison, chairman of the board and CTO, Oracle Corporation underneath, was a private phone number. Esther's mind struggled to connect the dots. Oracle, the software giant. Larry Ellison. The yachts, the private islands, the headlines. One of the wealthiest, most powerful, and notoriously reclusive men on the planet was sitting in Mel's diner in Omaha, talking to her. It felt like a fever dream. This had to be a prank. A very, very weird prank. "This is a joke, right?" she asked, her voice trembling between fear and a wild, ridiculous hope. "My accountants certainly think my life is a joke, but I assure you I am quite real," he said, a faint smile playing on his lips. "As is my offer." "Your offer?" "I'm flying to Los Angeles tomorrow. My jet will be ready by noon. I want you on it." Esther stared at him speechless. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to roar in her ears. Los Angeles, a private jet. It was the stuff of movies, not the stuff of her life. "Why?" she finally managed to whisper. "Because I'm a gambler," Ellison said, his eyes gleaming. "I've spent my life betting on technology, on companies, on people. I look for disruptive talent, something that can change the game. I don't know a thing about the music business, but I know authenticity when I see it. I want to put you in a room with the best people in the world and see what happens. I want to see if that lightning can strike twice." He stood up, placing a $100 bill on the table next to his coffee cup. It looked absurdly out of place. "That number on the card rings directly to my personal assistant, Catherine. She's expecting your call. Be at the private aviation terminal at Epley Airfield by 11:30 a.m. A car will be waiting for you outside this diner at 10. It will be a black Lincoln Navigator. Don't be late." He walked towards the door, his movements measured and confident. He paused with his hand on the handle, turning back to look at her. She was still standing there, frozen. The business card feeling like it was burning a hole in her palm. "Esther," he said, his voice softer now. "People who get a chance like this are a dime a dozen. People who deserve a chance like this. They are 1 in a billion. The question is, are you brave enough to take it?" And with that, he was gone. The diner door swinging shut, its little bell tinkling into the vast, silent night. Esther was left alone in the fluorescent glare, her heart pounding a frantic, chaotic rhythm against her ribs. The $100 bill lay on the table. The business card was in her hand. The hum of the clock on the wall no longer sounded like a countdown to another wasted day. It sounded like a bomb ticking. The 6 hours after Larry Ellison left Mel's diner were the most surreal of Esther's life. She moved in a daze, performing her duties on autopilot. The sun began to rise, painting the Nebraska sky in hues of soft pink and orange, but she barely noticed. Her universe had shrunk to the size of the heavy, cream-colored business card in her pocket. When her shift ended at 7 a.m., she didn't go home to sleep. She drove her rattling 2004 Civic straight to the one place that felt like an anchor in her swirling reality, her mother's small, tidy apartment in a modest assisted living facility. Laura Carter was propped up in her favorite armchair by the window, a blanket over her legs. The MS had progressed, making her days a frustrating negotiation between mind and body, but her eyes were as sharp and perceptive as ever. They widened in concern as Esther burst in her face, pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. "Ellie, honey, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Esther sank to her knees beside the armchair, her breath coming in ragged bursts. "Worse, Mom. I think I met a billionaire." She recounted the impossible story, the man in the corner booth, the song, the business card, the insane offer of a private jet to Hollywood. She pulled the card from her pocket and handed it to her mother. Laura held it, her fingers tracing the embossed letters. She was a practical woman, her life defined by pragmatism and resilience. "Larry Ellison," she read aloud, a soft whistle escaping her lips. "Well, I'll be. I saw a documentary about him once. Owns half of an island in Hawaii." She looked at her daughter, her gaze searching. "Ellie, this could be dangerous. Men like that, they don't just hand out favors. There's always a price." "I know," Esther whispered. "That's what I thought. It feels too good to be true. It has to be a scam or worse." "What did he say he wanted?" He said he was a gambler, that he wanted to put me in a room with the best people and see what happens. He said my voice was lightning in a bottle." The words felt strange and foreign on her tongue. Laura was silent for a long moment, watching the morning light catch the dust motes dancing in the air. "Your grandmother always said you had a gift," she said softly. "She said it was a sin to keep it locked up." I've always felt so guilty, Ellie, that my sickness clipped your wings." "No, Mom, don't ever say that," Esther said fiercely, her eyes welling up. "Taking care of you is the most important thing in the world to me." "I know," Laura said, stroking her daughter's hair. "But a mother wants her child to fly. This is a crazy, terrifying, once-in-a-universe chance. If it's real, maybe you have to take it." Bolstered by her mother's cautious blessing, Esther took the first step. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number on the card. She expected a voicemail, an automated system. Instead, a crisp, professional voice answered on the second ring. "Catherine Hale speaking." Hello," Esther stammered. "My name is Esther Carter. I was told to call this number." There was no surprise in Catherine's voice, only brisk efficiency. "Miss Carter, good morning. Mr. Ellison informed me you would be calling. I trust your shift ended well." The casual mention of her shift sent a shiver down Esther's spine. They knew. "I'm to confirm your transportation. A black Lincoln Navigator will be at your place of employment. Mel's 24-hour diner at 10:00 a.m. sharp to take you to the airfield. Is that understood?" My employment. Mr. Ellison finds it a memorable landmark," Catherine replied dryly. "He is currently in a series of meetings, but he will join you on the flight. We have a suite reserved for you at the Beverly Wilshire for your initial stay. A preliminary contract from Oracle's entertainment division has been couriered to a top legal firm in Omaha for your review. K&L Gates downtown. An appointment is set for you at 8:30 a.m. with a Mr. Davies. The car will take you there first. Any questions?" Esther's head was spinning. A top-tier law firm. A contract. This wasn't a whim. It was a corporate-level operation unfolding at lightning speed. "No, I think that's it." "Excellent. We'll see you in Los Angeles, Ms. Carter." The line went dead. The meeting with the lawyer, Mr. Davies, was even more disorienting. He was a man in his 50s, with a kind, serious face who looked at Esther over his spectacles as if she were a winning lottery ticket that had just blown in through his window. "Miss Carter," he began, gesturing to a thick document on his desk. "This is unconventional, to say the least. But I've vetted it. It's a development deal. Essentially, Mr. Ellison's private investment arm will cover all your expenses, travel, lodging, training, legal fees for an initial period of 6 months. In return, they retain a first option right to produce and distribute any music you create. The terms are surprisingly generous, almost philanthropic." He looked at her again. "You must have made quite an impression." The legalese was dense, but the core was clear. It was real. This was happening. As she signed the initial agreement, Her hand shook so badly the signature was barely legible. Just as she was leaving the lawyer's office, her phone buzzed. It was a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Heard you're hitting the big time. Don't forget who wrote that song with you. Jake." The message hit her like a punch to the gut. Jake, her ex-boyfriend, a charming, lazy musician with a guitar and 1,000 excuses. They had dated for 2 years, a relationship that had fizzled out under the weight of his jealousy and her growing responsibilities. The song, her song, had been written on late nights after her shifts while he was usually out with his friends. He'd heard her humming parts of it occasionally, suggesting a chord change that she usually ignored. He had no claim to it, none at all. But the text was a threat, a dark cloud on the edge of her bright new horizon. She ignored it, her heart hammering. There was no time. The black navigator was waiting as promised in the parking lot of Mel's diner. The driver, a stoic man in a black suit, opened the door for her without a word. As she slid onto the cool leather seats, Sal came out of the diner, wiping his hands on his apron, a look of pure disbelief on his face. The drive to Epley Airfield's private terminal was silent. Esther watched her drab Omaha life slide by the tinted windows, the strip malls, the familiar streets, the low-slung houses. It felt like watching a movie of a life she used to live. The jet was a thing of impossible beauty. It wasn't a plane. It was a silver spear, sleek and powerful, with the simple, elegant O of the Oracle logo on its tail. The stairs unfurled, and Catherine Hale was there to greet her at the top. She was a woman in her 40s, impeccably dressed in a grey pantsuit, her expression neutral, but her eyes missing nothing. "Miss Carter, welcome." The interior of the Gulfstream G650 was a whisper of wealth. Cream leather seats, polished dark wood, soft recessed lighting. It smelled of leather and clean filtered air. There was no sign of Larry Ellison. "Mr. Ellison will be along shortly," Catherine said, gesturing to a seat. "Can I get you anything champagne water?" "Water is fine, thank you," Esther mumbled, feeling like an imposter in a princess costume. She sat by the window, her hands clasped in her lap. The engine spooled up with a low, powerful whine that vibrated through the floor. Just as the cabin door was about to be sealed, Larry Ellison strode up the steps carrying a slim leather briefcase. He had changed into a crisp, dark polo shirt. He looked less like a tired traveler and more like the commander of the universe. He nodded at her, a flicker of a smile in his eyes. "Glad you decided to come," he said, taking the seat opposite her. The door was sealed, and with a gentle push the jet began to taxi. I still can't believe this is real," Esther said. "The best things in life often feel that way," he replied, looking out the window as the runway markers blurred past. "Authenticity is the most valuable and rarest commodity in the world, Esther. Not just in music, but in everything. In business, in life. People are desperate for it. They can smell a fake a mile away. What I heard in the diner was not fake. The jet accelerated with breathtaking force, pinning Esther to her seat. Within seconds they were airborne, climbing steeply into the endless blue sky. The city of Omaha, her entire world, shrank below her, until it was just a patch on the vast quilt of the American Midwest. "I told you I was a gambler." Ellison continued, his voice calm amidst the awesome power of the ascent. "I'm betting that your talent in its purest form is a product the world wants to buy. But Hollywood, it's a machine designed to grind authenticity into dust. It will try to change you. It will try to sand down your edges, auto-tune your voice, and dress you up in something you don't recognize. It will try to make you a product, not an artist. He leaned forward, his gaze locking with hers. I can open the door for you. I can put you in the room. But I can't fight that battle for you. This isn't a gift, Esther. It's a test. Your test is to see if you can walk through the fire and come out the other side still holding that lightning in a bottle. Most people can't. A chill went through her that had nothing to do with the altitude. This wasn't the fairy tale rescue she had half dared to imagine. It was a challenge. A gauntlet had been thrown down at 30,000 feet. As the jet banked west, pointing its silver nose towards the distant promise of Los Angeles, Esther looked down at the shrinking heartland. She had left her old life behind. But the text from Jake was a stark reminder that the past has a long reach. And Larry Ellison's words were a warning that the future was not a welcoming paradise, but a battlefield she would have to conquer on her own. The gamble wasn't his, it was hers. The descent into Los Angeles was like flying into a constellation that had fallen to earth. The sprawling grid of lights stretched to the horizon, a glittering, overwhelming promise. For Esther, who had only ever seen it in movies, the reality was dizzying. The Beverly Wilshire Hotel was another level of surreal. Her suite was larger than her entire Omaha apartment, with a view overlooking the opulent storefronts of Rodeo Drive. There was a walk-in closet, a marble bathroom with a tub deep enough to swim in, and a welcome basket with fruit she couldn't name, and a bottle of champagne that cost more than her monthly rent. It was a gilded cage, and the silence within its walls was more profound than the quiet of the empty diner. For 2 days, she was left utterly alone. There were no calls, no meetings, no instructions. It was a deliberate disorientation, a stripping away of her old context before the new one was built. She felt adrift, a ghost haunting a life that wasn't hers. She spoke to her mother every few hours, her voice a lifeline back to reality. The text from Jake she continued to ignore, hoping it was a pathetic one-off jab. On the 3rd day, Catherine Hale called. A car will be waiting for you in 10 minutes. You have a meeting. The car, another silent and immaculate SUV, whisked her away from Beverly Hills and into the canyons. It pulled up to a house that seemed to be carved out of the very cliffside, a marvel of glass, steel, and white concrete overlooking the entire LA basin. This, she was told, was the home studio of Victor Thorne. If Larry Ellison was the quiet, immense power of a tectonic plate, Victor Thorne was the jagged energy of a lightning strike. A legendary producer in his late 50s, he had a string of Grammy Awards and a reputation for being a genius with a cruel streak. He was lean and wired with a mane of chaotic grey hair, a deeply tanned face, and eyes that dissected you rather than saw you. He wore a vintage band t-shirt, ripped jeans, and an expression of profound boredom. He met her not with a handshake, but with a critical head-to-toe scan. "So you're the diamond in the rough," he said, his voice a cynical rasp. He led her through his house, which was less a home and more a museum of rock and roll decadence, into a state-of-the-art recording studio. The mixing board was as long as a car, bristling with 1,000,000 knobs and faders. "Larry played me the recording," Victor said, gesturing for her to stand in front of a microphone in the sound-proofed booth. "The one his security guy made on his phone in the diner. Cute, very rustic. Okay, let's hear it. Sing the song." The command was abrupt, clinical. The warmth of the diner, the privacy of her solitary performance was gone. Now she was a specimen under a microscope. Her throat felt tight. She took a breath and began to sing her own song, feeling foreign and fragile in this sterile professional space. She poured her heart into it, trying to recapture the emotion of that night. When she finished, the silence from the control room was deafening. She could see Victor talking to the sound engineer, his hands gesturing dismissively. Finally, his voice crackled through her headphones. "Okay, the pitch is wobbly. The phrasing is amateurish. The core melody has some potential, but the structure is a mess. Lyrically, it's quaint." He sighed, a sound of immense suffering. "Look, kid, that whole tortured artist in a diner thing. It's a nice story. It got you in the door. It doesn't sell records. Authenticity." He practically spat the word. "Authenticity is a marketing angle, nothing more. We're not selling your soul. We're selling a product, and the product needs to be polished, packaged, and palatable for mass consumption." Esther felt her blood run cold. Every word was a scalpel carving away at the one thing she thought had value. "Larry might have a bug up his ass about raw talent," Victor continued, his voice relentless. "But I'm the one who has to turn this into something that plays on the radio between a pop diva and a hip-hop track. Your voice has a unique quality, I'll give you that. A smoky texture. We can work with that. But we need to sand down the Nebraska. We'll get you a vocal coach, a stylist, a media trainer. And we need better material. That little song of yours can be a B-side, maybe. I have a team of songwriters, the best in the business. They'll craft something for you." "But it's my song," Esther managed to say, her voice shaking. "It's my story." "Nobody cares about your story, sweetheart," Victor shot back. "They care about a story they can see themselves in. A story with a hook and a bridge and a chorus that gets stuck in their head. Now we're done for today. Go back to your pretty hotel room. Isabella, the vocal coach, will see you tomorrow." She was dismissed. Just like that. The driver took her back to the Beverly Wilshire in silence. She walked into her palatial suite, and the beautiful, opulent room felt like a prison. She had been flown across the country, lauded as a unique talent, only to be told that everything about her was wrong. This was the test Larry had spoken of. The fire, and she was already getting burned. The next few weeks were a blur of systematic deconstruction. Isabella, the vocal coach, was a kind but firm woman who made her do endless scales and breathing exercises, trying to smooth out the imperfections that Victor hated, but which Esther felt were the source of her emotion. A stylist brought racks of clothes, leather pants, designer tops, high heels that felt like a costume for a person she didn't know. She was handed demo tapes of songs written by others. They were slick and catchy but soulless. They were songs about clubbing, about generic heartbreak, about a life of glamour she had never lived. When she tried to write her own music, the words felt hollow, infected by Victor's cynicism, and Larry Ellison was nowhere to be found. She hadn't heard from him since the flight. She was his project, his gamble. But he had placed his bet and walked away from the table. Catherine Hale was her only point of contact, a coolly efficient administrator who deflected any questions about Mr. Ellison with, "He is confident in the team he has assembled." One evening, consumed by loneliness and frustration, she was scrolling through social media, a painful window into a world she no longer felt a part of when she saw it. A post from Jake. It was a picture of him holding his guitar, with a pensive look on his face. The caption was what made her stomach drop. "Working on some new tunes. It's tough when people take your art and try to pass it off as their own. But the truth always comes out. Hat songwriter, at plagiarism. Truth will out." It was vague, but it was aimed directly at her. He was laying the groundwork for his lie. A handful of their mutual friends from Omaha had liked it. A comment read, "You talking about Ellie Carter heard she ran off to LA." Panic seized her. This was no longer a private threat. It was a public insinuation. She felt a desperate need to talk to Larry, to the man who had started all this. But he was an unreachable god. She was completely terrifyingly on her own. Her breaking point came during her third session with Victor. He had her in the booth trying to record a vocal for one of the pop tracks he'd chosen. Her heart wasn't in it, and her voice sounded thin and strained. "No, no, no." Victor's voice boomed through the headphones, making her flinch. "Where's the grit? Where's the smoke? You sound like a terrified little girl. I asked for a pop star, not a choir girl." I can't connect with the song," she said, her voice trembling with unshed tears. "Then fake it," he yelled. "That's the job. Do you have any idea how many girls would kill to be where you are?" Larry. Ellison pulls you out of a greasy spoon, and this is how you repay him. By being precious about your art. You have no art. You have a raw ingredient that I am trying to cook into a meal someone will actually pay for. Now sing the damn song or get the hell out of my studio. That was it. The thread snapped. "No." She said the word quiet but firm. She pulled the headphones off her hands, shaking with adrenaline. "I'm not singing it." She walked out of the vocal booth and stood before the towering mixing desk, meeting Victor's furious gaze. "What did you say?" he growled. "I said no." She repeated, her voice gaining strength. "You don't want my voice. You want a voice that you can mold and manipulate. You want a puppet, and I won't be it. The woman you're trying to create in this studio, I don't know her, and I don't want to." Victor stared at her, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "Brave words, little bird. You think you can defy me? You have nothing. No money, no power, no connections. You are here because Larry put you here. You walk out that door, and it's all over. You'll be back in Omaha, slinging hash before the week is out. Is that what you want?" For the first time in weeks, a spark of her old self, the resilient survivor, ignited. "Maybe," she said, her chin held high, "but at least I'll have my own voice." She turned and walked out of the studio, out of the glass house on the hill, and into the blinding California sun. She had no idea where she was going or what she would do next. She had just walked away from the biggest opportunity of her life. The gilded cage was open, but she had just stepped out into a wilderness more alone than ever before. Walking away from Victor Thorne's studio was like stepping off a cliff. The adrenaline carried Esther for 3 blocks down the winding canyon road before the terrifying reality of her situation crashed down on her. She had no car, no friends in this city, and she had just committed career suicide before her career had even begun. She had defied the kingmaker that Larry Ellison had appointed. She eventually hailed a cab back to the Beverly Wilshire, the ride a blur of palm trees and gnawing anxiety. The opulent suite, once a symbol of an impossible dream, now felt like a final mocking luxury before her inevitable fall from grace. She expected a call from Catherine Hale at any moment, a curt, formal dismissal. She expected her key card to be deactivated, but the call never came. The silence from Ellison's camp was absolute and somehow more terrifying than an outright rejection. It was as if she had ceased to exist. That night, the dam of her composure finally broke. Huddled on a couch that cost more than her car, She sobbed for her lost chance, for the cruelty of the industry, for the crushing weight of her mother's hopes. And in the depths of her despair, she received a notification on her phone. A gossip blog, one of the bottom-feeding tabloids of the internet, had posted a new story. The headline was a dagger to the heart. Billionaire's Diner. Cinderella, a fraud ex-boyfriend, claims she stole her $1 million song. Her blood ran cold as she read the article. It was a slimy sensationalist piece, quoting Jake extensively. He painted a picture of himself as the tortured, heartbroken artist. He claimed they had written her signature song, the one from the diner, together during their relationship. He alleged that he wrote the core melody and most of the lyrics, and that Esther, in her ruthless ambition, had stolen it, run off to LA, and left him with nothing. To prove his claim, he had supplied the tabloid with a crudely recorded demo of himself, singing a bastardized version of the song, along with a few carefully selected smiling photos of them as a couple. It was a masterpiece of manipulative fiction. Victor's words echoed in her head. Authenticity is a marketing angle. Jake had created his own. The comments section was a viper's pit. Anonymity had sharpened people's knives. I knew she was too good to be true. Gold digger and a thief. Larry Ellison got played. She has dead eyes. You can always tell. The industry, which hadn't even known her name yesterday, now knew her as a fraud. The phones that had never rung were now guaranteed to stay silent. Victor Thorne wouldn't have to lift a finger. The jackals of public opinion would do his work for him. This was the true face of the Hollywood machine. It didn't just chew you up. It spat you out and let the world stomp on the remains. She was drowning. But as the waves of panic and humiliation washed over her, something else began to stir deep inside. A flicker of rage. They were all trying to take her voice. Ellison wanted to test it. Victor wanted to erase it. And now Jake was trying to steal it. The song wasn't just a melody. It was the purest expression of her pain and her hope. It was the only thing that was truly hers, and she would not let them take it. The fight wasn't over. The next morning, Esther woke with a clarity she hadn't felt since she'd left Nebraska. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She wasn't Victor's puppet, and she wasn't Jake's victim. She was Esther Carter. She called Isabella, the vocal coach. "Isabella," she said, her voice steady. "I need your help. Not as a coach from the label, as a person. I need to find a real recording studio, a small one, somewhere with a piano and a microphone where no one knows my name." Isabella, who had seen the ugly side of the business devour countless young artists, hesitated for only a second. Perhaps she saw the desperate sincerity in Esther's voice, or perhaps she simply hated seeing talent wasted. "There's a place in North Hollywood," she said. "A guy named Marco, young, hungry engineer. He owes me a favor. I'll make a call." That afternoon, Esther took a taxi to a nondescript building wedged between a laundromat and a taco stand in NoHo. The studio was tiny, the walls covered in worn acoustic foam. Marco was a young man with kind eyes and a passion for sound that hadn't yet been soured by the industry. He didn't ask any questions. Esther sat down at the slightly out-of-tune upright piano in the corner. She didn't play her original song. That felt tainted now, a piece of evidence in a crime she didn't commit. Instead, she let the fury, the betrayal, and the heartbreak of the last few weeks pour out of her. A new song emerged raw and powerful. It was a ballad, but it wasn't soft. It was a declaration of war. The lyrics were a direct answer to her accusers. You can take the picture, you can twist the truth, sell your plastic story of a misspent youth. You can scream your poison, you can stake your claim, but you will never own my name. The melody was haunting, building from a quiet, wounded whisper to a soaring, defiant chorus. She wasn't just singing notes, she was testifying. Marco, sensing he was capturing something special, worked with an intense focus, keeping the production minimal and clean. It was just her voice, the piano, and the unvarnished truth. They recorded it in 3 takes. When it was done, she knew what she had to do. Back in her hotel suite, she used her laptop to do something that terrified and empowered her in equal measure. She found the email address of the gossip blogger who had written the original story. She uploaded the new song, which she titled My Name, to a private SoundCloud link. Then she turned her laptop's camera on herself. No makeup, no designer clothes, just her in a plain t-shirt. Her face pale, but her eyes blazing. She hit record. My name is Esther Carter. She began, her voice clear and strong. A few weeks ago, I was a waitress in Omaha, Nebraska. A few days ago, a blog you might have read called me a thief and a fraud. They said I stole the song that changed my life. They used words from my ex-boyfriend, Jake, to paint me as a liar. She paused, taking a steadying breath. He is the one who is lying. His claims are a cruel and desperate attempt to attach himself to my story. But I'm not going to let him or anyone else write my story for me. The song he claims he wrote is mine, but I'm not going to fight over something that has been tainted by lies. Instead, I'm going to answer him with the only thing I have left, my voice and my truth. She looked directly into the camera, her gaze unflinching. This is a new song. I wrote it yesterday. I'm calling it My Name. It's my answer to the gossip, to the industry that tried to change me, and to the man who tried to steal my past. It's for anyone who has ever felt like their voice was being taken away from them. The link is below. Thank you for listening. She stopped recording, attached the video file and the SoundCloud link to an email, and sent it to the blogger. Then she posted the video on her own brand new and previously empty social media accounts with the hashtag #MyName. She turned off her phone, her heart pounding. She had just bypassed the entire industry machine, the producers, the labels, the publicists, and spoken directly to the world. It was either the smartest or the dumbest thing she had ever done. She didn't have to wait long to find out. She woke the next morning to the sound of her phone buzzing incessantly. It had been on silent, but the vibrations were making it dance on the nightstand. With trepidation, she picked it up. It was a flood. Hundreds of notifications. The gossip blog, smelling a bigger story, had posted her video and the song immediately. It had exploded. The hashtag #MyName was trending. The comments were a tidal wave, but this time they were a wave of support. This is authenticity. Chills. Jake who, this song is fire. Team Ellie. You can hear the pain and the power in her voice. I believe her. People were sharing her video, arguing with the trolls, dissecting the lyrics. Independent music critics were writing glowing reviews of the song's raw power and clever direct response. She hadn't just defended herself. She had created her own narrative, and the public was buying it in droves. In less than 24 hours, she had gone from a disgraced nobody to a viral sensation, a symbol of artistic integrity fighting back against the machine. She had found a loophole in the test. When the system was rigged against her, she had created her own system. Late that afternoon, As the online storm was still raging, a single solitary email landed in her inbox. It was from an address she recognized from the private jet. The sender was Larry Ellison. The subject line was blank. The body of the email contained only 2 words: "Well done." The 2 words from Larry Ellison landed with the force of a tectonic shift. Well done. It wasn't an offer of help, nor was it a promise of salvation. It was an acknowledgement, a sign that her defiant, desperate move had been seen by the man at the top of the pyramid. The silence had been broken. The next morning, another email arrived. This one was from Catherine Hale. The tone was, as always, crisp and professional, but the content was seismic. Mr. Ellison requests your presence at his estate in Woodside tomorrow at 2 p.m. A car will collect you. Woodside. Not an office, not a hotel, but his legendary Japanese-inspired estate in Northern California. A sanctuary so private that few outside his innermost circle had ever seen it. This wasn't a dismissal. This was an audience with the Emperor. The journey itself was a statement of power. A short flight on the Gulf Stream to San Jose, followed by a silent drive into the misty, redwood-covered hills of Woodside. The estate was not a mansion in the ostentatious Hollywood sense. It was a sprawling, harmonious blend of wood, water, and stone, a testament to meticulous design and immense wealth. Esther was led by a quiet attendant through serene gardens, past a shimmering koi pond, to a minimalist pavilion overlooking a man-made lake. Larry Ellison was standing there, not in a suit or a polo shirt, but in a simple dark yukata feeding the fish. He didn't turn as she approached. "The koi," he said, his voice calm and resonant, "are a study in grace and resilience. They swim against the current. They can live for over 100 years. They are more complex than they appear." He finally turned to face her. His eyes, those sharp, analytical eyes, held a new expression. It wasn't pity or pride. It was respect. "I imagine you have some questions for me," he said. Esther's resolve, forged in the fires of the last week, held firm. "I have one," she said, her voice steady. "Why? Why did you leave me to be torn apart?" Ellison tossed the last of the fish food into the water and watched the ensuing flurry. "I told you on the plane, Esther, this was a test, not just of your talent, but of your character. I could have crushed Victor Thorne with a single phone call. I could have had my lawyers decimate your ex-boyfriend before his lies ever saw the light of day. But what would that have accomplished? It would have made you my ward. A protected species, unable to survive in the wild. Hollywood would have seen you as Ellison's pet project, not as an artist in your own right." He began to walk along the water's edge, and she fell into step beside him. "Victor is a shark. I put you in the water with him because this entire industry is an ocean full of them. I needed to see if you would be eaten or if you would learn to swim. When you walked out of his studio, I was intrigued. When Jake's story broke, I was watching closely. I will admit I didn't foresee you would counterattack with such a brilliant public move. You didn't just play the game, you changed the board. That is what I bet on. That is the disruptive talent I saw in the diner." A wave of understanding mixed with a lingering resentment washed over her. She had been a pawn in his grand strategic experiment. "So my humiliation," she said, her voice tight, "was just a data point for your investment. Do not mistake my methods for a lack of belief," he countered, stopping to look at her directly. "It was a calculated risk. I risked you failing. But you, Esther, you risked everything. And you won." He allowed a rare, genuine smile. And you made me a great deal of money in the process, hypothetically. The viral buzz you've generated is worth more than any marketing budget I could have allocated. You've proven your value. Now we proceed on your terms." The shift was instantaneous and absolute. That afternoon, a meeting was convened in a conference room at Oracle's headquarters that was more accustomed to billion-dollar software deals. On one side of the massive mahogany table sat Esther with Larry Ellison beside her. On the other side sat a humbled and visibly nervous Victor Thorne, along with the president of the record label he worked with. The power dynamic had been completely inverted. "Mr. Thorne," Ellison began, his voice dangerously soft, "it seems your assessment of Ms. Carter's potential was incomplete." Victor, stripped of his usual arrogance, could only nod. "Her recent output has been very impressive." "Esther," Ellison said, turning to her, "tell these gentlemen what you require." This was it, her moment. She looked across the table, not at Victor, but at the label president. "I want a new contract," she said, her voice ringing with confidence. "I will have complete creative control. I will write or co-write my own material. I will choose my producer. My first single will be my name, exactly as I recorded it with Marco. My debut album will include the original song from the diner, which I will record my way. And my advance will be used to set up a trust to cover my mother's medical care for the rest of her life." She paused, then delivered the final blow. "And I will never work with Victor Thorne." The label president, seeing the viral analytics and knowing Ellison's backing was now absolute, didn't hesitate. "Agreed." The legal battle with Jake was laughably short. Ellison's legal team, a veritable army of the world's most fearsome lawyers, descended. They unearthed text messages where Jake had begged Esther for money witnesses from the Omaha music scene who knew he was all talk, and even an old, forgotten social media post where he'd mocked Esther's sad little songs. Faced with a lawsuit that would bankrupt him for generations, he signed a full retraction and a permanent non-disclosure agreement within 48 hours. 3 months later, Esther Carter stood backstage at the Orpheum Theater in downtown Los Angeles. It was the night of the New Faces Industry Showcase, a make-or-break event for rising artists. Her single, My Name, had debuted in the Billboard Hot 100. She was no longer a viral sensation. She was a bona fide artist. She wore a simple black dress, her auburn hair falling naturally over her shoulders. She looked out at the packed house, a sea of industry executives, critics, and fans. In the front row, she saw her mother, flown in by Ellison's team, her eyes shining with tears of pride. In a private box above, she knew Larry was watching. When she walked on stage, the applause was thunderous. She sat at the grand piano, the spotlight warm on her face. She took a moment, closed her eyes, and found the quiet center within herself. This wasn't Mel's diner, and it wasn't Victor Thorne's sterile studio. It was her stage. She didn't open with her hit single. Instead, she began to play the soft, melancholic chords of the song that had started it all. Streetlights paint the rain gold on the glass. Another ghost of a day has passed. The voice that filled the historic theater was not the polished, perfect instrument of a pop star. It was something far more potent. It was the voice of a survivor. It was smoky raw and achingly real. It was the voice of a waitress from Omaha, Nebraska, who had been tested by fire and had emerged not unscathed but forged into steel. It was the sound of lightning finally captured on her own terms. Esther Carter's journey wasn't a fairy tale flight to fame. It was a brutal, turbulent ride through the storm of the modern entertainment world. She was given a chance, But it was her resilience, her refusal to be silenced, that ultimately defined her success. Her story is a powerful reminder that the brightest talent can be found in the most unexpected places, but that talent alone is never enough. It takes courage to protect your voice, to fight for your truth, and to turn a billionaire's gamble into your own victory. What did you think of Esther's incredible story of defiance? Would you have had the strength to walk away like she did? Let us know in the comments below. If her story of resilience and triumph inspired you, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss our next story about the real-life dramas that hide just beneath the surface of our world.